Before we start today's video, I thought I would let you all know about a Streamlabs goal I had that I hit and what has happened since. The goal was simple, to raise £60. The idea was to raise enough money then to buy tentacle mitts that I in fact based my original avatar on. This is my original avatar. These are the gloves in question. Well, the Polish seller that made those 3 years ago never replied to me. So it was only very recently when I got my tentacle hat from the Etsy seller that I asked her if she could make the gloves, and I showed her the picture and she made them. They will be mailed to me today, I believe, all the way from America, which means I will be eternally happy and grateful because I will have something I've wanted for 3 years, and it was heavily influential in how my avatar's hands are. Anyone ever noticed how they're not the same colour as my head? Well, that's why, because of the original colour from the original picture. I thought I'd follow up with this because I've heard about others who do Streamlabs goals or raise money for things and never show anyone what they did with it. Cough cough, shit rat. Cough, cough. Anyway, moving on. So the subject of today's video is going to be something that actually only broke last night. It was something that I had not known about and honestly shocked me when I heard about it. Although when I first heard about it I did think, wow, this could be in California's future. Hopefully the majority of you will understand why in a moment. Where there has been a contaminated blood scandal in the NHS. And this article comes directly from the BBC. Now I have a couple of articles that we could pull on and I'll link below. But basically, there is a series of testimonies being given by people in a video on the BBC article, which I'm not going to play. People who have been infected with HIV and hepatitis, which has all now been heard at the start of an inquiry into contaminated blood. Now, the public inquiry is looking at how thousands of NHS patients were given infected blood products during the 70s and 80s in what has been dubbed the worst ever NHS treatment disaster. Clearly, they haven't been to East Surrey Hospital then. I lost 2 relatives to that hospital, so please forgive me for having certain disdain towards that particular place. Now, in a video played to the inquiry, one man described how he felt he lost his entire life after finding out at the age of 43 he had been infected with hepatitis C when he was a child. In his case, he was given an injection of blood products when he was 8 for a swollen knee that was misdiagnosed as haemophilia. I really feel sorry for this guy, to be honest. And this all stemmed from misdiagnosis. I hope that doctor was found and struck off or had his pension taken away. There was another person in this video whose identity has been hidden by the BBC, and that's fine, where she became infected with HIV through her husband, who was a haemophiliac, who had been given contaminated blood. And to take a quote directly from her, this was in the mid-80s, and the climate of fear, discrimination and stigma associated with HIV and AIDS was horrendous. We coped the best we could, we were silenced and we kept quiet. Ah, another one of those instances where you're told to shut up for the greater good. I think that's what they said to Jimmy Savile's victims. I assume at some point within the next 5 to 10 years, this kind of rhetoric will be exactly what we hear from California, because after all we shouldn't discriminate against those who have HIV when they want to give blood, right? Right? I'm struggling to contain my sarcasm. I wonder why. Another victim, a widow whose husband died of AIDS in 1994 and also had hepatitis C, said, "I feel we were treated very badly. No one has listened to us over the years." Well, this is one of those typical things in the UK, like child grooming gangs. People didn't listen to them for decades. Could anyone truly find it hard to believe that there are retards also in the medical industry? Is it so hard to believe that there are people in all walks of life who are happy to make people just simply be silent for the, quote, greater good? The needs of the many, after all, should surely be taking precedent over those poor individuals that don't truly matter, as long as the cogs of industry are still moving forward. I feel like I'm talking very commie now. I'm going to stop doing that, unless my subliminal message got through, in which case, Yvonne et Niage. There have been previous inquiries into this scandal, but this is the first UK-wide public inquiry that can compel witnesses to testify. I really hope all of them do, and I hope all of them get a boatload of money for this. The shame this shines on the NHS is astonishing, and those responsible should be made to absolutely suffer for it. It comes after decades of campaigning by victims who claim the risks were never explained and the scandal was subsequently covered up. Now there is below a short history of the inquiry. This is all new to me, but I have managed to corroborate most of it, so I will read what is in fact absolutely confirmed. About 5,000 people with haemophilia and other bleeding disorders are believed to have been affected with HIV and hepatitis viruses over a period of more than 20 years. Nearly 60% of those, by the way, have since died. I hope their surviving families, if they have any, pursue legal action in this, because what has happened is an absolute travesty. This was because they were injected with blood products used to help their blood clot. Some of the products that were used in the time frame mentioned would include companies like BPL, which the British government sold an 80% stake in the company to Bain Capital, Armour, or Revlon, in 1978, because Armour was before 1978. Well, Armour, not Revlon. Revlon bought him in 78. Bayer, or Cutters Labs, Highland or Travenol, which is now Baxter, and Immuno AG, which are also owned by Baxter. They created the plasma donations via a process called plasmapheresis, although that could also be the name of the process used in which the plasma is summarily injected into someone, replacing removed plasma, or blood. Yeah. Oh, someone's going to correct me on that, I know. Thank you in advance. It was a new treatment introduced in the early 70s. Before then, patients faced lengthy stays in hospitals to have transfusions even for minor injuries. And how this blood was obtained is where the shady part comes into play. Because there was a shortage, well, people were selling it and they were prisoners. Prisoners were not screened as thoroughly back then. Now, the blood products were made by pooling plasma from up to 40,000 donors and then concentrating it. It's just a shame it wasn't like orange juice. People who have underwent blood transfusions were also exposed to the contaminated blood, where as many as 30,000 people may have been infected. By the 80s, the product started to be heat-treated to kill viruses. It is quite common through that plasmapheresis thing I mentioned, that people who do in fact go through that are treated in advance, given shots for tetanus and hepatitis B in advance as a precaution, which is totally understandable given the circumstances. However, with all this said, questions remain about how much was known about this and why some contaminated products remained in circulation. Now, screening of blood products began in 1991, and by the 90s, synthetic treatments for haemophilia became available, removing the infection risk. Interesting little anecdote I want to add to this. The person I work with, he is a Jehovah's Witness, and he can't take blood if he's ever injured, but an alternative was in fact created, and he gets that when he is treated. It's quite impressive to see how far we have come, to the point where you don't have to have blood. Granted, it'll never be on par with blood, and I'm sure many people would want him to get the hepatitis C cause he's Jehovah's Witness. But it's interesting nonetheless, how far we've come. Now, as far as the inquiry, there is a question about why we're having it. The government, unsurprisingly like many governments before, has been criticised for this, and rightly so. Understandably, because this has been hidden for so long. Now that it is finally in the open, the government is being held to account, and hopefully this will be mentioned in PMQs tomorrow, because if it is, then of course I have a very interesting Wednesday evening streaming on this very subject. It's highly likely it'll still be Brexit though, which has dominated everything for months. Now there have been previous inquiries. One was led by Labour peer Lord Archer, and it was privately funded. It held no official status and was unable to force witnesses to testify. Now, I don't want to force people to do anything if they don't want to, but hopefully, now that an inquiry is going on and that could last up to 2 years, hopefully those who are affected do start to receive compensation. It does indicate that there have been payments made to some people, but as far as I'm concerned, this all needs to be very much public. Maybe not the names of those who don't want their names out there, but what people are doing, how people were hurt, why they were hurt, and of course suitable compensation, and a very public apology by the NHS, not the government, the NHS, and then the government. I think the NHS have to get ahead of this now and do it publicly first, as a sign that they are willing to work with the government and with the inquiry in question, and I think they need to hand over those who, government and other NHS people, need to be handed over to be properly dealt with. Might I recommend a sole ISO cube for every single person responsible? Granted, it was a different time and I do understand that, but there is an obvious blame to play here when you're taking inmate blood You're not screening people, and I know maybe the techniques didn't exist as thoroughly as they do now, but I firmly believe this is going to open up quite a nasty wound in the NHS, and of course the government, but it already has plenty to begin with. Anyway, with this going on, I shall of course keep all of you updated on it if you are at all interested in it. So I hope everyone has a lovely Tuesday, and thank you all for listening.
Oh, goddowns.
In your arse.
Imagine my shock